Ninjani. Asikaboni into. Ah, nami nimelinewe. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, comrades. We just want to have a minute while everybody walks in to just wait. Is everyone in who should be in? Were you the last one to walk in? Were you the last one to walk in, or are others still outside? Could you please ask those that are still outside to file in, because we are about to start. If there's nobody else outside, I think we are good to go. Again, apologies for starting 10 or so minutes after. Such as it is in this part of town, traffic can get in the way, and so. But this is an important occasion for democracy as we gather this afternoon. We gather. Let me start by saying who I am. My name is Mos Ntla, Reverend Mos Ntla. I am with the Defend Our Democracy Campaign Secretariat, and along with me are colleagues that are part of the campaign. As you would be aware, the campaign consists of diverse stakeholders, many of whom are here present, people from different civil society organizations who feel, as we do, that unless the people of South Africa rise to the challenge of defending their democracy in the event of the failure of institutions that normally would be expected to do that, then all of us are headed for tough times ahead, and indeed are already in those times in some way. So I'd like to acknowledge the members of the media who are here, and we are so thankful that you could join us. The members of the Academy, I see Professor Chetty back at the back there, representing the VC, adverts, and different ones of us who are here representing different formations that all of whom agreed to stand shoulder to shoulder with us as we rise to the challenge of defending our democracy. So I welcome everybody to this event. It is an event where we will do a formal launch of a discussion paper which has had several generations of updating, massaging, consultations that we've done around the country, just to have people who are in different ways engaged with the task of strengthening, of deepening, of defending our democracy, apply their minds about what this juncture that we're in means for all of us. We all know that the Zondo Commission just presented us a report that is a very serious indictment on us as a society. And it is many pages of report that, if I know South Africans very well, they probably, many of them will not read that document because it's too huge. But it carries within its pages very serious matters about which every South African should be concerned, and all of us do well to answer this question about what do we do now, given that charge sheet of the Zondo Commission report. So I've got an outline of different speakers that will be making several presentations, and I will go straight away to invite Reverend Frank Chikane, who will just give us an opening address at this occasion. Reverend, over to you.
An opening address is too serious. I think remarks, yeah, it won't be an opening address. I can see that Sean decided to sit very far there. I'm sure you're worried about the meter distance between us, and we need to be seen to be complying in this room. So I don't know how we do it, but make sure that we comply. I don't want the story about the launch be that we broke the law. So make sure we do comply. I would like to thank you, Reverend Mosentla, and thank you for everybody who's here. This is a very historical moment. I thought about it much more harder this morning as I was preparing for it. And I had an interview this morning, and before I was given a chance to say what this document was about and etc., the question was, are you trying to set up another UDF? That was the first question. And so I would like to, because most people who are here are not people to be educated about the issues that are here and are well informed. I just want to say it in a short and brief way that we had a project of liberation, and we believe that we are going to set up not just a representative democracy, but a participatory democracy. Parliamentary system gets you end up with a representative democracy. But in our system and constitution, you find both representative and participatory when you go to the ward committees, which many people missed. It's where the real participation should be happening on the ground. We had a project of changing the lives of the people of South Africa. For those of us who lived during apartheid days, it was our humanity. I mean, I fought more about my humanity than anything else, that I was treated as less than a human being. I must keep on saying this because the younger generation forgets that during my lifetime, I was made to buy in a restaurant through a window and not go inside the restaurant during my lifetime. And when you finish buying, you sit in a rock outside there, and whites went in, there were chairs there. But the price was the same. I mean, it just didn't make sense. And so for us, it was our humanity, but it was also to correct the economic imbalances. There was a huge effort to do this when we started. The promise of a new society, the promise of new economic system that's going to allow people to participate. We use the language, a better life and a better Africa and a better world. Do you remember when we started? That's what we wanted. And I just want to say, midway, a rocket fell on us, and we were derailed. The ship got derailed, completely. And for the last 10 to 14 years, we were off the rails. And there's a time when I used to argue, when people said people are poorer in a new South Africa than during the apartheid days. I said no, and I was very confident. The numbers were there, the statistics showed it. But today, I can't say that confidently because we nosedived and went in another direction. We corrupted, we got our governance system corrupted, we even got our parliament corrupted. I mean, the day when parliament acted outside the constitution, I knew that we had lost it. And that day must be in our history books because it's very critical. And so there are people who decided to capture the state, capture leadership of state-owned entities, capture the government, even departments, good DGs began not to do what they were supposed to do because they were scared about what will happen to them. Once this fear, democracy is gone. And now people kill each other in a branch meeting. You know, they kill you for standing as a councillor. That's not the South Africa we fought for and struggled for. And because of what has happened, where people have lost confidence in the system, the trust, it's no more there, even for political parties. And I generalize it because it's important to understand this is not about just one group or another. It has corrupted the whole system. And people begin to operate in a way that is not what we struggled for. And so I thought in my introductory remarks that I will venture into the area that Shan is going to talk about. That's why I was looking for you, Shan. This document is a product of conversations amongst us first and with those who subscribe to the Defend Our Democracy campaign. And you remember we launched it with a document. I did ask our communications team to remind us about that document, make it available, which was agreed upon during a real emergency in the country where the constitution was threatened, people wanted to destabilize the country, tried hard to do it, failed. And we also had people who were really forming militias, and so the country was under threat. So we campaigned for 1 year to stop this. But stopping it does not mean the damage that has been done is gone. So we realized 1 year later that actually the damage is so deep that even if you stopped and arrested people, the culture has taken root up to the ground, up to the grassroots. And so this document, it's about starting a conversation, which we are now launching today, to go to people countrywide to have conversations until June, when we will then discuss the final product. Final draft, sorry. I must be careful about the language. Final draft and workshop it and agree on the way we are going. And I just want to say 5 things, list them, and I stop. We want to reverse the downward spiral because we are on the way down there. I always remember the day when Comrade Faisal, I said, I can't come to your house then park my car outside because I felt I'm not even safe to leave my car unattended. That's the level at which we arrived at by 2015, 2016, 2017. It was quite critical. We want to reverse this spiral. We want to recover our values, which we have lost. I mean, I can't believe that people steal money, billions, and they walk around and nothing happens to them. The security forces have been captured. We want to repurpose our politics completely. I mean, change it. We want to revisit and reimagine the future of this country, because what we expected in 1994 has been devastated in the last 13 years or so. I counted yesterday 14 years. And we want to re-envision our political system and values, which must deliver the promise, and that promise of a non-racial, democratic, equitable, society that we talked about. We want to go back there. We want to get people to think anew. And that's what this conversation is about, and be able to build into the future. As we discussed today, we'll go into the area of grassroots mobilization. And that's why people then thought we're going back to the old days. But actually, we don't have a choice at this stage. It's either we lose our freedom or we take a stand and mobilize people as the last line of defense, as we said when we launched DOD. And so this is what we are here about.
Thank you, Reverend Chikane, for those words of introduction. He'll be followed by Comrade Nishan Balton, who will actually go into the meat of the document that is the foundation of our envisaged conference for Renewal and Change, which will happen later on in June. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to welcome Comrade Shan as he does this for us. He comes from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, one of those civil society organizations that we're partnered with. Thanks.
Greetings to everybody. My task here is to introduce this discussion document that this conference today serves as a release point to enable it to now go out publicly and to start the process of discussion. I think the last time that South Africa was involved in a discussion around the content and the quality of its envisaged democracy was when we were collecting input into the drafting of the new constitution. And I think it struck me when we were doing this that we actually don't talk about democracy enough. We don't talk about what it means, what its substance should be, and what our own involvement in it needs to be on a day-to-day basis, beyond elections. What the result is that we get to the points where we are today. So it's called a Conference for Democratic Renewal and Change. Renewal is about a couple of things. It's about renewing trust. And I'll present a couple of slides from the Afro Barometer survey that talks about just how levels of trust have plummeted in this country. But it's also about ownership. Ownership over politics, ownership over resources, and ownership over our democracy. And beyond just politicians and political parties. It talks about participation. But I think the discussion hopes to prompt us to think about new ways of participation, but also the kind of work that is required to be involved in a participatory democracy. again, beyond just voting. I know that it's hard, but because it's hard, it allows people to then get away with things that ordinarily they should not be. It allows secrecy to come into place. It allows information to be withheld because they know. Nobody will read, as I was asked to a few days ago, a 1,000-page annual report of the city of Johannesburg and asked to come and give comment on that. Now, I'm yet to come across any citizen of Joburg who would have read that 1,000-page annual report to have a sense of what the city did with its huge billions of budget. So it's that kind of participation. There's a renewal of governance that's required. Governance across the board, as many of these posters would have shown around here, has all but collapsed. I know the president has said we are not yet in a state of, in a failed state. The outgoing Treasury DG is very sure that we are heading in that direction. But what this document is about is to say, how do we prevent that? What is our collective responsibility to, in fact, ensure that that doesn't happen? And lastly, it's a renewal. It's to renew our commitment to the Constitution. Last year, this time, we were talking about a threat to democracy, a violent threat, and that manifested itself in many ways. We were dealing with a threat to defy the Constitutional Court. Today, we deal with a variation of that threat. But it's a threat that says we don't need a constitutional democracy. We need a parliamentary democracy. Because parliament should be the supreme institution in this country. That same parliament that overlooked the Nkandla pool is expected to override a constitution. So that's the debate that South Africans need to have. We think there is a need for change. Almost 30 years into a democracy, we must be frank. What is working, what's not working? As we sit here today, more than 50% of South Africans are unemployed. Millions will go to bed hungry tonight. Millions there's huge numbers of people who have not yet received textbooks in this country. So the system is not working. It needs to change. Our politics needs to change. We are moving into a political climate where we are beyond one-party dominance. Multi-party democracy is a new phenomenon. As a country, we need to learn how to start engaging with it. What are the norms and standards that we want from all political parties and all political representatives? What is the form and content of our politics? Beyond what it is that the politicians themselves describe. And politics needs to be beyond that of political parties. The price of petrol today is a political decision. So unless I think South Africans begin to understand that politics involves from the air that you breathe to possibly the price of your burial site, everything in this country is political and therefore needs to have a higher level of importance. So this is the Afro Barometer survey. Let me just go through it quickly. High levels of trust by 2021 was our independent broadcasters, government broadcasters to a certain extent. Lowest levels of trust, local councils, opposition parties, the police, the governing party, parliament, traditional leaders, and so forth, and you can see that. Even the Electoral Commission is not spared with declining levels of trust. Likewise, that of our courts. Trust in political parties has plummeted hugely compared to where they were to where they are today, not only of the governing party, but of opposition parties as a whole. And it's useful at this point to reflect that there are more South Africans who chose not to vote in the last elections, registered and eligible voters, than the total number who actually did. So more people didn't vote than the total number who actually voted. And that is a huge indicator of a democracy that's not working. But most importantly, in a question that Afro Barometer asks, would people be prepared to forego elections if all kinds of services, law and order, and other kinds of things were to be delivered? And people think, a huge number of South Africans think that that would be a better option. When this happens in most countries, authoritarianism begins to creep in and moves into power. And that's why I think there's the alarm bells today. These are the conclusions of that study. You can go through it yourself. But this conference seeks to identify threats to our democracy and to search for solutions. That search for solutions comes through the discussions that will happen nationwide from this particular document. The conference would look at how to identify national campaigns to safeguard our constitutional democracy, not conference. Identify threats and search for solutions, to learn from best practices here and across the world, to consider changes to our constitution where people think that is required. The constitution gets changed, there are amendments every year. But should South Africans think that there are areas of the constitution that can enhance our constitutional democracy, then we must talk about it. We need to focus on a public service that works for all. We need to address issues of economic justice, climate change, and socio-economic rights at that conference. And it must emerge with a national campaign to combat capture and corruption, as I think is said on the posters, that those are ongoing. But ultimately, it must talk about a new kind of politics, a politics that is tolerant, a politics that is ethical, a politics that doesn't see opposition as being enemies, a politics that requires whoever is in office to focus on the needs of its citizens rather than of their members. This document in sections B, C, and D talks about just broadly the democracy, the threats to democracy, constitutional democracy, and the need to defend that democracy. It concludes with what should be done. Foremost, it talks about what Reverend Chikane has spoken about. The need for an active citizenry is to start talking about ideas around people's power in a democracy. What is that? What does it look like? How should it take place? Because certainly what has happened in Diepsloot is not people's power, it's people's anger. But it shows that there are possibilities for taking that anger into forms of people's power if organized properly. To either work with the state or to pressurize the state. Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to talk about. We need to talk about changes that will make democratic institutions more durable. How do you appoint people there? What kinds of skills? Is it only race or is it beyond race? A public service that is more conducive to ethical public servants. At the moment, you've read Ethel's piece today. Those who are ethical are finding it incredibly tough to survive. But those national heroes are going to become fewer and fewer unless we have a public service that is conducive that is more conducive to the kind of ethics that are needed. There are huge discussions that need to take place, and citizens need to be much more involved around the current political system. Changes to the electoral system and everything else is what this document needs to enable discussions. Lastly, is what is the form of people's power in a democracy? Is it just ward committees? Is it SGBs? Is it CPFs? Or is there more that we need to start thinking about? Finally, is what is civil society's role? Do we work in a fragmented way? Do we find points of collaboration? And how do we define a common national agenda that all civil society can begin to cohere around, if that is at all possible? So in conclusion, we need to take democracy seriously. We need to teach it. We need to debate it. We need to improve it. And in that way, we defend it. So this document, we hope, will now become a discussion document in every home, in every mosque, temple, church, school, sports organization, Tupperware society, Stokvel. The campaign itself will make facilitators available where those are required. As a minimum, it will host sessions, nine provincial sessions, facilitated discussions on that. But where organizations want this discussion to be facilitated by anybody associated from the campaign, I think that the contact details are here. So Reverend Chikane, in conclusion, thank you for bringing us together over a year ago and to alert us to this kind of threat. I think today we need many more and many more younger people to understand this threat, but to shape the future that will eradicate this threat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shan, for helping us have a handle of this discussion paper, which forms the basis of our envisaged conference for the renewal of our democracy and for change. All of us, I'm sure some of the things that have been shared by Shan are familiar to us, and we probably haven't connected them in quite the way that he has helped us to do. But all of that hopefully will make for a lively debate, not only among us as civil society organizations, but thankfully through the media, these conversations can become a national one. And so we would like to get to the next presentation. As I indicated earlier, we have a whole range of stakeholders in society who are participants in this struggle, call it our democratic project, the renewal project, defending and deepening and strengthening our democracy. We have as our next presentation Professor Ahmed Bawa, who is from the academia as a sector, and so we are delighted that we can actually have all of the sectors of our society feeling that this too is a challenge they'd like to be seized with. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the campaign for inviting us to make a few comments here today. And I think that it comes at a very pertinent time for the university sector with so much going on in that sector. You must have heard yesterday of the burning of university facilities, a laboratory at the Qwaqwa campus of University of Free State. This morning we heard about shootings outside the home of Professor Sakela Buhlungu at University of Fort Hare as part of a hit list against people relating to tenders and so on. So we are in a very serious crisis, and universities always thought of themselves as being sort of isolated from society, but actually we are very much a part of the challenge facing broader society. But I think that we have to take the high ground by stating that universities are social institutions. They are created by society to play particular roles. And amongst those roles, of course, is to build a more kind of inclusive, competitive economy, is to deepen democracy, it's to strengthen social cohesion, and so on. And these are roles that universities are expected to play. And of course, ultimately, it's about building engaged citizens who, in the process of nation building, but also in the context of the grand challenges facing humanity, thinking of our young people also as global citizens. And in some respects, I think we have to think about how we can get universities to the point where, where that role can be played in the most effective way. And what I would like to begin with is just by saying that we have to just go back to understand what the core functions of universities are. The first, of course, is just teaching and learning, and through that process, producing new intellectuals, producing experts, producing a new generation of engaged citizens, and so on. And in that respect, of course, so much has to do with what goes on in the classroom, but also what goes on outside the classroom. And in some senses, I want to tie that to campaigns of this nature. Of course, at the other end of the spectrum, universities are engaged in research and innovation, and those are roles that universities must play, which must feed into this kind of campaign that we are working on now, but also to kind of really provide us with kind of a deep kind of analysis of the tragic kind of consequences of what has happened in the last 10 to 14 years or so. At the same time, it seems to me at least that we have to think about the last 5 or 6 years in the university sector. We had the Fees Must Fall, Roads Must Fall campaigns, and then we had COVID-19, of course, which really showed up just how unequal our society is, but also how unequal the university sector is. And in that regard, I think that we must come to some deep understanding about whether the role of universities in the last 24 years or so has been complicit in producing the kind of society we have now, or whether it has actually pushed against that outcome. And that's an analysis that universities are going through right now. We have to remind ourselves that, coming out of the 1994 transition, President Nelson Mandela put in place a National Commission on Higher Education, and that commission produced a social compact. It was a social compact which brought together all the sectors of the society to talk about the future role of universities in society. And I think we've done well in a range of outcomes of that National Commission on Higher Education, that social compact. The question really is whether we need to revisit that social compact, to reimagine a new social compact, or whether we should really go back to that social compact and understand how to rebuild it, and how to ensure that we are we place our universities on a good footing, if you like, as we head into the future. Just last year, Universities South Africa held a conference at the end of last year, held a conference on the theme of the engaged university. And the purpose of the conference was really twofold. The first was to revisit, reimagine the social ownership of the universities. In a sense, what we've had over the last 10 or 15 years has been an erosion of the social ownership of our universities. And that has to be a key question that we face. And so in some respects, this conference comes at the perfect time to allow us to reimagine the role of universities in society. So I'm very pleased to say that actually, though, on the one hand, there's an opportunity for universities to feed into this conference and to make it a conference that will allow us to move forward. And on the other hand, that it's a conference that will feed into the reimagining of universities and their role in society. With that, Chair, I'd like to hand back to you. Thank you very much.
We're thankful, Prof. Ahmed Bawa, for giving us an idea about some of the pressures that indeed may be experienced in other sectors, but play out even in that most sacred of the sectors of our institution that we look to for innovation, for building a future that is sustainable and that is prospering because of the research that is happening. So to hear of the burning that is going on there is really startling. So thanks again for giving us an insight into that. We'll then go on to watch a video by Busisiwe Mavusho. I don't know if the video setup is good to go. Are we good to go?
I am present. I'm actually delivering the message live, Chairperson, if that's okay. Can I continue?
Wonderful. Yes, you are on the floor. You're live. So welcome and indeed continue.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for the invitation for the business constituency to come to this platform to come and share its views, and most importantly, lend its continued support to the Defend Our Democracy campaign. And as the business constituency would like to firstly acknowledge the great work that has been done in the past year by the Defend Our Democracy campaign in standing up to elements that were intent on destabilizing the state and went on to launch an unwarranted malicious attack on the judiciary. And as we embark on deciding what the future direction of the campaign will be, may we never underestimate the power we have as the electorate and as South African citizens in deciding the future of this country. May we not take for granted the responsibility that is conferred on each and every single one of us on the need to hold those in political power accountable. And as business, we've been requested to share our perspective on why the democratic renewal agenda is critical for our country right now. And from where we are sitting, this is very simple. We are very clear from a business perspective that we need democratic renewal in South Africa, because the reality that we face in our country today is that the big failure for our country is that the politics in this country no longer work. And unfortunately, this is the elephant in the room. There are just too many crooks, within political spheres, and they unfortunately far outnumber the few good men and women who want to see real change. I mean, when you're sitting in an environment where our elected leaders steal food parcels from the hungry and PPE from the sick and dying, then you know for sure that you have lost it as a country. And as if that is not bad enough, you have a disgraced former minister vying for the ANC top job, and there are people supporting his candidature. And we see nothing wrong with having a murder-accused political leader in Mpumalanga. And I think at some point, as we do these reflections as a country, we might just have to agree and submit that and probably maybe acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, the politicization of the civil service in this country was a fundamental error. And this is precisely why we are holding world records for all the wrong reasons as this country. Highest inequality, high unemployment, high failure rate of small businesses, and one of the worst education systems in the world, and the list just goes on. So from where we're sitting as business, democratic renewal is definitely a necessity, especially when we find ourselves teetering at the brink of collapse as a country simply because the politics no longer work. And the truth of the matter is that politics is currently seriously undermining our economic efforts as a country. It is seriously undermining our efforts towards economic recovery. And what happens in politics matters, because the economic growth of any country is constrained by its political economy. So looking the other way and being diplomatic about our state of affairs, unfortunately, no longer serves us as a country. We are unfortunately quickly going to get to a place where we severely weaken our business case as a country, along with our position as a gateway to the African continent. We are currently sitting in an environment with 35% unemployment in terms of the narrow definition, 46% in terms of the expanded definition, where you have more people unemployed than those that are employed in all the provinces except Gauteng and the Western Cape. And I think we just have to admit that this is no longer a crisis, but a catastrophe, and an intervention is required urgently. And I don't know how many of you saw the 17th WEF Global Risk Report that was released on the 11th of January 2022, which highlighted issues such as prolonged economic stagnation, unemployment, state collapse, failure of public infrastructure, and the proliferation of illicit economic activity as the top risks that are facing South Africa in 2022 and beyond. And the report unfortunately goes on to say that South Africa has been identified as one of the 31 countries with high risks around the erosion of social cohesion. You know, when the speaker before me spoke about what's happening in Diepsloot, and that is what is actually going to be our reality if there isn't any serious intervention soon. And unfortunately for us as a country, this escalation in country risk means that trying to get investment into the country will be rather difficult. So the renewal that we're advocating for is that which should ensure that we make it easy for capital to land in South Africa. And a fundamental, and we need to realize that a fundamental tenet to that is that at the very least, we have to ensure that the system and the network industries have to work, and they should be functioning as they should. I think we are mistaken as a country to think that we can attract investment and overly burden it at the same time, because you see, capital is like water. It will always follow the path of least resistance. So the private sector is most likely to invest, and they will invest, but that will be triggered by two things and two things only. We need policy reform, and we need a functioning state. And unfortunately, if we don't have the democratic renewal that we require, the policy reform and the functioning state that we're calling for as the private sector will not be achieved. Business is therefore in full support of the democratic renewal and change that is being advocated for, because we realize that if it is to be, it is up to us. And as poet June Jordan says, we are the ones that we've been waiting for as a country. No one is coming. So business is in full support of this initiative. And I think, let me pause here, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. Chairperson, back over to you.
On that sobering note of we are the ones we've been waiting for, nobody is coming. Thank you again, Mr. Siwe. She is the CEO of BUSA, the business unit in South Africa, which is a significant business formation in our country that we are delighted we can be in association with them in this endeavor. And so, without wasting more time, friends, I know that we would like to be done by 4. So I'm going to appeal to the next several presenters to shorten to the degree possible the time they will take. I want to also welcome those who are just coming in, Comrade Max and Elinia Sisulu, who just stepped in. We are thankful for their attendance this afternoon. I'd like to proceed to our next speaker, who will represent the views of Labour, coming as following on the business sector. It's always good as South Africans to work towards a place where Labour and business can actually share a common vision of the future we want. So over to you, Comrade Frank Ngumalo.
Okay, so thank you, Chairman. I'll try to shorten my presentation. My General Secretary was supposed to be here, but she's engaged in other commitments. That's why she's asked me to represent him. So the Reverend Frank Chikane, Dr. Fazal Randera, the leadership of the event, our democracy campaign, comrades and friends, all protocols observed. It is indeed a great honor and pleasure for FETUSA to be invited to this auspicious launch of the Defender of Democracy Coalition discussion document on democratic renewal and change for our beloved country. It is indeed an auspicious start of a collective effort by various civil organizations from different sectors of our country to arrest the rapid slide of our hard-won democracy into political chaos and disorder. We cannot afford to betray the memory of our founding fathers by watching helplessly as our once proud and internationally respected nation is reduced to a laughingstock of the region, the African continent, and the world. FEDUSA fully supports the core premise of the renewal document, which is to build an irreversible, nationwide and people-anchored counterforce that will break the current narrative which claims that politics and the South Africa of future generations are the prerogative and preserve of political parties and politicians. For nearly 30 years now, since the democratization of our nation in April 1994, we've put faith and trust in our political parties and politicians. There was good progress in the first decade and part of the second decade of our democracy. Apartheid laws were repealed. There was electrification and service delivery on a massive scale to previously disadvantaged and underserviced communities. But by the start of the third decade of our democracy, things began to fall apart and crumble. A new political culture where incumbency and public office were converted into pathways to personal and crony riches instead of being a public good in the service of the people became the order of the day. Our institutions of democracy were hollowed out and repurposed to serve the nefarious interests of the political connected and their families. None were spared: the police, the NPA, the judiciary, parliament, SARS, and sections of the media. This is in addition to a political culture that is at odds with our values as a people, where people accused of serious crimes are allowed to hold public office, including position in provincial legislatures, shamelessly arguing that they have not been found by a court of law. The impunity, skewed ethics, and gangster morality of it all are mind-boggling. FEDUSA hopes that the journey that we as civil organizations are embarking on today will show clear links between industrial scale looting and corruption, the failure by many municipalities across the length and breadth of our country to deliver basic services to communities and the lives of ordinary people. As FEDUSA, we demand that our government proceed with speed to prosecute and without any fear or favor all those individuals that have been implicated by the Zondo Commission as an absolute minimum. Going forward, we need to rebuild and strengthen all our institutions of democracy so that never again will they be hollowed out by individuals with agendas that do not serve the interest of our people, but those of their families and friends. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks for the presentation. We are running with time not entirely with us, so we will try to shorten our presentation. So thanks for doing that, Comrade Frank. And so we are going to be going now to the faith sector. Again, the faith sector is fully part of the campaign. Not only the Christian factor, but also a whole number of other religions participate with us. So for now, we will hear from Reverend Mzwandile Molo, who will be representing the South African Council of Churches. Welcome, Fundis.
Thank you very much, Reverend Kla, and greetings to everybody on behalf of the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, who unfortunately is unable to be here, for he is out of the country. And a special word of support and greetings from our President, the Archbishop of Cape Town, Archbishop Thabo Makgoba. South African Council of Churches applauds the initiative to galvanize South Africans to take an active responsibility of the culture and exercise of our constitutional democracy. The time has come for all South Africans to play a role in the achievement of what the SACC calls the promise of the post-apartheid South Africa, which is a just, reconciled, peaceful, equitable, and sustainable South Africa, free of racism, tribalism, xenophobia, and gender prejudice, free of corruption and deprivation, with food and shelter for all, and every child born to grow to its God-given potential. This is the South Africa we pray for. In 1996, the year that our national contractual document, the Constitution, was made our supreme law, Nelson Mandela said, public awareness and participation in maintaining efficiency in government within the context of human rights are vital to making a reality of democracy, unquote. The initiative launched today with a document for national discussion and consideration by anyone and everyone creates the basis for Mandela's prescripts for the reality of democracy to be achieved. Public awareness and participation, that is. It creates a fresh opportunity for South Africans to identify elements, the values and standards that must be in place for the achievement of the promise of the post-apartheid South Africa. Amongst these, the SACC facilitated Civil Society Manifesto has identified the need for the healing of our individual and collective woundedness. The wounds inflicted by our past are often unconscious and show up in the fracture of our social fabric and the desolation that characterizes our human relations. Some of this manifests itself in the present-day South Africa's experience of acts of racism, xenophobia, violence against women and children, violent crime and lawlessness, as well as many other social ills. Reconciliation, which is often seen as mainly referring to racial and ethnic reconciliation, goes beyond the traditional concerns and must include addressing poverty and inequality, economic transformation for a reconciled economic dispensation. A healed and reconciled South Africa must be a society that has faced squarely the stark realities of the systemic impact of poverty, of broken families, and redefined family structures, of abiding racism and ethnicism as an identity rallying phenomenon. The urgent imperative of economic transformation must bring into the productive economy the excluded majority of, for example, young people, 77% of whom have no livelihoods and no hope, of women denigrated and devalued socially and economically, and of rural people who flee rural poverty into urban squalor. Democracy cannot survive the obscene levels of poverty and inequality that is the South African reality. It is the last thing to occupy their minds. Economic transformation must deliberately and systematically enhance human dignity and the quality of life by preserving not only the environmental sustainability of life, but also by enabling the participation in the productive economy of poor citizens and the excluded majority, with a process that progressively engenders wealth and income security and reverses poverty, inequality, and low growth through inclusivity. Comprehensive quality education that gives access to high-quality education for optimum enhancement of human potential from cradle to career and beyond, including preparation for informed and active citizenship, adequately preparing the young to be economically productive and to be informed protagonists and defenders of constitutionalism, as opposed to the self-serving lawlessness and the destabilization that has characterized South Africa in recent times. But above all, and to make the other factors hold good, the Civil Society Manifesto points to the need to anchor constitutional democracy as a trustworthy measure and guarantor of a transparent, predictable, and accountable governmental system for South Africans. It is a call for the Constitution to hold its place as the highest law of the land, rooted in openness, democracy, accountability, and social justice. It is a call for the preservation of a constitutional democracy anchored on serving the interests of all who live in the country, especially those who are socially, economically, and politically the weakest. In spirit of the popular dictum, the people shall govern. The document we launched today invites all of us to honor Mandela's call to make democracy a reality through awareness and active participation. Participation not through song and sloganeering, but participation through critical thinking. Participation by asking and answering the hard questions. This interactive document invites us to ask questions on how we would like to hold our elected representatives, our legislators, the president, executive mayors, and provincial premiers accountable to us as communities and the nation. Invites us to remind those who lead us that we are not their servants, but they are our servants. Do we need direct public elections for parliament, mayors, and the president, with probity and integrity as critical measures for public office? We may ask further questions like, do we need provincial legislators that can only act on laws already passed by the National Assembly? Do we need the whole provincial government edifice that is essentially ethnic-based, sustaining the apartheid ethnicized politics of race and Batustand nonsense? Do we need this at the astronomical cost of over 500 billion rand annually, which could do a nation-building use in education and the economy? To save your time, Reverend Kla, I'll go now to the conclusion. It is our hope that this process will offer the country the opportunity to arrive at a firm foundation of public values and minimum standards, the basis for a common, reconciled understanding of South African citizenship under the Constitution, which shall inform the governmental environment and services for the common good, regardless of who is in government. In this context, we are totally beginning to process a process which will hopefully embolden us to have to begin to say with one voice, never again shall the country surrender public values to the whims of politicians, regardless of party or leadership thereof. As the period between the month of Freedom Day and the month of youth activism in June is the time of youthful action for the rekindling of the spirit of freedom and justice for all. As we have said elsewhere before, we live in the spirited hope that an ethical democracy shall yet be anchored in the shores of our citizens' hearts and minds, both private citizens and citizens in public service, tethered with both the informed ethics of participation and the moral courage to stand for an ethical society. Let us engage with this document with that spirited hope. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Reverend Molo. We are actually running way beyond the time we thought we would be able to stay together here and still complete the business. We would like, at the end of our time together, for the media to field what questions they may have. So there's a sense in which if, as we go through the presentations, if you feel that what has been already presented adequately covers the voice you wanted to raise, please indicate and rather take as little time as is possible so that we can have everything done within the time that we had budgeted for, including with the media interactions. Our next presentation would be from the health sector, Professor Rudo Mativa, who would give us a video presentation. As you know, a lot of corruption and decay has set in there. So over to you, Prof, if you are able to hear me.
I can hear you, and I am appearing live. Just a word to the organizers: you need to be better organized in future. Don't add me as a last addition to your itinerary, but all is good. And I will take it that all protocol is observed. Today is World Health Day. It is also the anniversary of Charlotte Maxeke's birthday. But in terms of health, our country is experiencing a lot of turbulence. And if you just look at the province of Gauteng, there is so much disorder in the public healthcare sector. It's now almost a year that Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital burnt down, and it's only back functioning at a capacity of just under 50%. And nobody can explain why it's taking so long to get this major academic hospital back to full functionality. And this has a knock-on effect on the other public health facilities in Gauteng. And not only in Gauteng, most of our other provinces refer patients of referral, causes a backlog. As I'm speaking to you, there is a lack of beds at Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital, at Helen Joseph Hospital, at Rahima Musa, at Leratong, at Telemuhorani Hospital, at Betha Goa, at Sebokeng Hospital. This is where we are having a flood of patients coming in that were previously not planned for or budgeted for. And what is causing this? It is mismanagement, maladministration of the healthcare sector, not only in this province, but in the other provinces. And why? It is for the reasons that most of you have mentioned, that our democratic elected officials have done a 180-degree turn and decided to practice some kind of leadership that we don't understand. The truth that lies prostrate on the pulpit of South African human history is that we have come to disrespect and dehumanize all stakeholders in the healthcare sector. We do not care about the central person that the core service must be delivered to in the healthcare sector, the patient. We don't care about the suppliers of consumables and equipment in the healthcare sector, so we don't pay them. We really don't care if we run out of medications to treat the patients. And what does that mean for us as a country? Do you think you can defend a democracy in a nation that is sick? You will not have a nation to even talk about democracy. You need a healthy society to start a debate about democracy and to actually be active in democracy. So I'm going to keep this short and say, start with the health of your citizens, and then start teaching them about democracy and debating it and being active about democracy and delivering it. Thank you.
We're thankful, Professor Matiba, for your words and your rebuke, well received. Thank you for that as well. We were delighted for your engagement at this press conference. We will proceed straight ahead to our next presentation on water and sanitation by Noto Madisa. So that again, I think the caveat is the same with the others, that if you are able to shorten it, we'd be delighted. Sure.
Thank you, Marut. Revolutionary greetings, Secretariat members of the DOD campaign, religious leaders, sectoral speakers, and media crew. I'm Madisa Noto, representing Ntwane Community Development Forum, in short NCDF, from Mutse in Limpopo. Chair of the session, we are so privileged and considered ourselves lucky to be part of this launch. As NCDF, which is the Rural Community Driven Forum, we would like to urge members to give this concept a broader interpretation, so that when I say in our area, a group of elderly men and women have gathered rocks and raised 1,500 for the construction of the bridge, that has been reflecting on the attractive IDP of our local municipality for more than 15 years, then you'll be able to understand that the responsible municipality, which is Elias Motswaledi local municipality, deformed and deviated from its core values. The only thing that the local municipality did was to provide a transport to load the stones to the designated area to build the bridge. Something is not right there. We are not expecting municipality to improvise, but we are expecting municipality to display its competency in any intervention. This was a community-initiated project to build a bridge for themselves. That is how our level of understanding is concerned about renewal and change as NCDF. We welcome this concept, Chair of the session, with warm hands, because it came at a time when we as NCDF have been calling the Minister of Water and Sanitation since last year to visit our area to witness the asbestos pipes that have been installed in the village, primarily to supply water to the vulnerable communities. Asbestos pipe in our area have been installed. These pipes are now laying bare. We are advocating for rural water spectrum and citizenry participation to ensure water action strategy plan implementation. As I'm speaking now, the newly appointed ward councillor from opposition was able to refurbish some of the water taps, and community members are so delighted for receiving running water because of his intervention. In conclusion, please allow me to comment about the SIU report that was released recently in January 2022. As the organization, the NCDF lodged a complaint about the graft in Mutse water relief project that was meant to eradicate water shortage in the area. We were so dismayed and perplexed by the findings of SIU indicating that there are no wrongdoings. They said there are no wrongdoings in the project where an amount of 143 million was injected by the previous minister. To date, there is no single water drop coming to our community from that project. The relief did not achieve anything visible as evidence of its success, as it got abused with absolute impunity. Yet the SIU report says everything was in order. Where on earth have you seen the investigations taking place without involving the complainant? As NCDF, we are the complainant. And we are expecting the investigators to engage us about the allegations that we mentioned. But that did not happen. But they were so confident to draw an inference to say there were no wrongdoings. Be that as it may, we are not deterred by the biased, narrow, and one-sided investigations executed on the basis of protecting other service providers that think they are untouchable. We are calling upon the law enforcement agencies to be ethical and exercise their duty without fear and favors. We shall win eventually. Change and renewal are a must now. I thank you. Brethren.
Tate Madisa, thanks for helping us connect the project of democracy to the livelihoods in communities such as Murutsi and the absence of water in a post-apartheid society, in a democratic dispensation. It indeed is an indictment. Thank you for your presentation. I'll proceed on without further ado to our next speaker, Shaeera Kalla, who's a youth activist, and I think it's been said earlier about the need to make our campaign an intergenerational one. You can see many of us in the room are from the older generation, and it is a good thing that we continue this thing together, so that in the end we have no reason to suppose that the struggle will be a short one. Even the youth will probably find that they have to continue 100 years from now. So it's good to sustain that intergenerational character. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say that I'm not young anymore. I'm 28 years old. But I think in South Africa, you're a youth till you're 35. It's certainly an anomaly. But I'd like to thank the Secretariat for inviting me to speak. I greet you with the Arabic words, Assalamu alaikum, may peace be on you. It's the holy month of Ramadan. And it's a pleasure to be with you, but I wish it were under better circumstances. Comrades, democracy is under attack like never before in my lifetime. Democracy is under attack like never before in the democratic dispensation of our country. And throughout South Africa, evil questions are being asked about who belongs. People are living in fear, and so-called vigilantes are running gun in hand, threatening the very social fabric of our society. Throughout the world, our climate is going haywire, as the deadly side of development and industrial progress can no longer be ignored. Globally, precarious livelihoods have become the norm, and we see boats of refugees crossing treacherous waters in the Mediterranean. And when we see this, we must realize that this earth is that boat. If some of us are drowning, all of us are drowning. Never before in my life have the dangers to contemplate what lies beyond the horizon been too ghastly to imagine, too horrible to visualize, too heinous to give thought to. Throughout the world, we have seen malicious propaganda and viral fake news being used for evil intentions. The power of those to divide is forceful and appears all-conquering. The temptation to blame those who are different, whether by race, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, religion, it's the easiest and nastiest tool used to divide us. We are living in a time of indeterminacy, and democracy is one of the things we dare not fail to protect. Like particles in a quantum field, multiple possibilities for the future pop in and out of focus. But the hope in these possibilities of our imagination really depend on protecting and refining our democracy. This task requires us to create a sense of collective ownership in democracy amongst those who have been violently displaced to its edges. What did freedom bring to Michael Komape and to Uyinene? What did freedom bring to evicted student Mlungisi, thrown on the streets because NSFAS was late on their payments? What did freedom bring to the hundreds of families evicted by landlords during the pandemic, despite what the law or the Constitution said? Comrades, as we chart a new way forward for our democracy, we must see with our eyes the failures of our democratic era. We must hear with our ears the cries of our elders and disabled being sprayed with water cannons as they stood in lines to access their grants. Democracy will only survive if we make it accessible and beneficial to all, if we re-establish trust in our democratic institutions. Democracy will be protected by all when it protects Mama Esther Mahlangu. Democracy will not be protected by all when activists, auditors, and whistleblowers are gunned down in our streets. Democracy will not be protected by all when children are unperturbed by the sound of gunshots and gang fights because safety is a privilege. Democracy will not be protected when air pollution from coal causes more than 10,000 premature deaths a year. Democracy will not be protected when pregnant women are sleeping on the floor at Rahima Musa Hospital. Democracy will not be protected when piecemeal grants cannot even meet people's most basic needs. Democracy will certainly not be protected by a political elite who cuts spending on education and healthcare but pumps money into policing. However, in this moment of doom, when the dangers are overwhelming, our resolve tested, we must look around this room and take comfort that we have traversed rocky waters. We have pulled ourselves back from the brink and charted a new way forward before. We are able to do this because our collective virtue is greater than our individual vices. Our collective resilience is greater than our individual despondency. And our collective desire for a more just and prosperous democracy, economy, country, continent, and world will not give in to those actively agitating for its failure. Every single one of us, wherever we find ourselves, must be curiously engaged in what kind of society we want, how we will get there, and what the role of the state and of ourselves is in this process. We need democracy, and we need more than democracy, because it has become abundantly clear that the handrails are off. The architecture of a system once trusted to take us forward has only been designed to take a few forward. Now we must come together to taste the pleasures of a shared rage against injustice to build a different world. So let us get to work. I thank you.
Thank you, Shaeera. We have come almost to the last, one of our speakers, Wayne Duvenage, Outer, the heads up Outer, will be presenting to us. It's assured me that he won't take much of your time, and he normally keeps his word, as every motorist in this country knows.
Thank you very much. Just going to keep it short and sweet. Look, we have a great constitution, but it has become meaningless. And I don't want to preach to the converted, we understand this, but it doesn't help us from sliding into this failed state where we are heading rapidly. We need to do something, and I think and hope from the Secretariat that this effort to bring about this, in defense of our democracy, to bring about this conference that will enable the change that we need to protect our democracy is absolutely critical. It's long overdue. We need leadership in government that is not of the norm, where what we're used to right now. We need extraordinary leadership. We need to ensure that we don't have an NPA and a criminal justice system that is trapped and drowning in paperwork of 10 years of state capture, while every day new murders, new rapes, new crimes are committed, and we cannot get to where we need to build hope in this country. And when we start losing hope, when hopelessness abounds, then we've lost trust. And that's a recipe for a soul of a country that is really not interested in trying to inject its energy, its people energy, and its investment to make the change that we need. So we're at a crossroads, we're at a precarious position now. We need to see government supercharged, the NPA, the Assets Forfeiture Unit doing their work. We shouldn't be watching videos of people in positions of power dancing around their Ferraris and their Lamborghinis and their lovely houses that they've stolen or been able to gain from us. Money stolen from you and I. Money that is much needed to fix the healthcare sector, education, and so forth. So we have a loss of hope in this country when our children are entering a broken education system, when we're having to go to hospitals and have to sleep on the floors, as we've heard. This is a hopeless situation, and we have to change it. We have to get our government. We're in our new administration. A lot was promised, and while there are signs that things are changing, it's certainly not happening fast enough. And we need to get out of this dangerous zone of hopelessness where we are fast falling into. We cannot stand back as civil society, and we urge everybody as part of this campaign to start realizing that every citizen has a role, to hold people to account, that we need to see the transparency, we need to expose the corruption, because right now there are deals, every day we see it out, people coming to us with procurement contracts that are taking place that are enriching individuals. Every single day, 3 years into this new administration, into this new so-called dawn, we are going backwards. We are wasting taxpayers' money. We are making the poor poorer. We are making our problems bigger. And come the next elections, just 2 years from now, are we going to have government of the same usual process? This Parliament has been kicking the can down the road on electoral reform. We need to make sure that the people that represent us in Parliament are people that we've elected, not people that were put on a list in the back room that will bow down to the political pressures of the elite. And they've kicked this can for 2 years after the Constitutional Court has ordered them to change the Constitution to ensure that electoral reform takes place. But they don't want that. We cannot allow this to happen. We cannot let them do this. We cannot let the President speak in his SONA speech about walking hand in hand with civil society, and yet we find a minister who's hell-bent on forcing a car power ship's deal down our throats that is not in the best interest of this country. This is enrichment, this is corruption that's taking place right now. So we've got a lot of work to do, and ARTA supports this initiative. So, Mr. Chair, over to you, and we look forward to seeing the change that has to happen.
Thanks, Wayne. It's such a delight to hear the words that you have shared with us. It gives us hope as we continue with this campaign. I'm going to then invite Sister Kalla to read the statement that summarizes the document that we're launching today, and as we work towards the conference. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Moss. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Celu Shivambu, and I work for the Defend Our Democracy campaign. I'm about to read the press statement for the Defend Our Democracy campaign that calls for public feedback on the conference paper on democratic renewal and change, the reason we gathered here today. The Defend Our Democracy campaign today launches its national discussion document on democratic renewal and change. We call on all members of society to engage on its contents and share with us the feedback. This document is important because through it, we hope that various sectors and organizations across the country, including individual members of the public, will use it as a basis to engage on the issues of democratic renewal and change. This deliberation and feedbacks that we will receive will form the basis of the Defend Our Democracy campaign's national conference for democratic renewal and change that is to take place in June this year. The Conference for Democratic Renewal and Change will identify the political and socio-economic and security challenges that threats are facing our country and search for solutions in this regard. It will also develop a framework for national campaign driven by an active citizenry and based on shared perspective to safeguard, renew, and change our constitutional democracy. It will also examine and learn from examples of people and organizations working to strengthen our democracy and its democratic institutions. It will consider relevant and appropriate changes that should be made to our constitution, legal and regulatory framework, and governance and electoral systems to revitalize our democracy. It will also explore ways of making our public service development people-centered, efficient, and effective. It will address issues of economic justice, climate change, and the realization of socio-economic rights, and design a nationwide campaign to combat corruption and state capture and call for those involved, irrespective of their status, to face the consequences of their unlawful actions. Representatives from various sectors of society such as labor, civil society, business, faith-based community, academia, media, sporting and cultural groups, social and development organization, women, youth formations, and the legal fraternity will be invited to attend. Between now and the lead up to the conference, the campaign will host facilitated workshops across the length and the breadth of the country, mobilizing all sectors of society, particularly grassroots communities, about the need for a revived democracy and political renewal. Fundamentally, we want to change the notion that politics and democracy is the sole preserve of political parties. We cannot limit our participation to democracy by voting every few years or not voting at all, as has been the case for the many in the recent local government elections. We need to be deliberating on these issues such as electoral reform, party funding transparency, how to access local budget information, how to ensure that all public representatives, governing parties, and coalitions are held to account, how to eradicate capture and corruption, and to ensure that those who are guilty wear orange overalls, and how to make sure that our streets and streetlights are not just left to fall into despair with the excuse that there is no budget to fix them. These deliberations are central to a participatory democracy because of these issues, which are in fact political in nature, they do impact us on a day-to-day basis. While we acknowledge the gains made in ensuring basic rights and services since 1994, we do believe that the time for democratic renewal is now. We can no longer tolerate a political culture that puts personal or party interest before that of the public, and that fails to deliver basic services, cannot account for the use of public money, cannot hold those responsible for destabilization to account, and denies that there is a public health, water and sanitation, and electricity crisis in this country. Today, for example, while the nation celebrates the birthday of the struggle icon Shaeera Kalla, a hospital named after her remains dysfunctional, severely affecting the public health system in Gauteng. Our call system is simple. We want every person living in South Africa to rally together and defend, protect, enhance, and improve South Africa's constitutional democracy. We, the people of South Africa, must stand as the last line of its defense. We ask the public to please log on to the Defend Our Democracy website on www.democracy.org.za to access the conference paper document. Alternatively, refer to our Twitter handle @4democracySA for the link of the discussion paper. This statement was issued by the Defend Our Democracy campaign. Thank you.
With those words, Sister Kaliwe, thank you that you brought us to the end of the presentations that we were going to make. Ours now is to do a Q&A with the media, and I'll turn over the chair of this session to...
And so please also feel free. Thank you, sir. There is a room...
Yeah, so I'm just a... And my name is Merle Favors. I've read through, not in great detail, but just looking at has been presented today. I'm not seeing the kind of emphasis on what has become, I think, one of the greatest threats to taking this campaign forward at its most fundamental level, and that is the proliferation of assassinations of young activists who are based in, for example, Abahlali in Durban, at Olobeni on the East Coast, etc. Now, these are the activists. If we've got any future, and as Ms. Fowler slightly alluded to this, if we have any future, it's in the youth and the energy in the youth. People like myself, who are an older generation of activists, are not going to be able to carry this campaign. We can support, but the energy needs to come from the youth. So I'm seeing insufficient emphasis on assassinations of grassroots organizations, people's organizations. It's all very well gathering together a range of professionals. Yes, we do need a professional support and a critical mass. But unless an organization like Defend Our Democracy comes up with concrete strategies about, one, highlighting the assassinations of the cream of our activists in this country, and two, can come up with strategies that can actually help to address these issues practically, then I fear I fear for the campaign.
Comrade Sean, can I give you to respond to the lady at the back?
The issue of whistleblowers is addressed. Bear in mind, this is a general discussion document that is aimed to prompt discussion on where are those areas that needs to be emphasized, but more importantly, what needs to be done. And we hope that in the discussions that flow from today, those ideas and suggestions will come through. And obviously, the detailing of that will further be elaborated on at the conference itself, where we hope, I think, more concrete resolutions on these issues will in fact be taken.
There's a hand at the back. Please, as you speak, please introduce yourselves and the organization you're from or the media house you're from.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim Powell, Direct Democracy, South Africa. Our problem is that we have to make sure that we're not one of the chattering classes, because what I've seen today is a great document. There's a lot of work that's actually been put into it, but there's nothing that's concrete which says that the voters will eventually be in with the decision making, will change policy directly. And the only way in which we can do this is to get people into Parliament and all three levels who've signed a civil document which says that they will commit themselves to direct democracy, referendum, to make sure that the voters eventually are in charge of the politicians. And I'll leave you with this thought. We do not so much have a democracy in South Africa, we have a 5-year dictatorship. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Shaeera, would you like to respond to the sir over there and his comment, or is there someone else from the floor, from the panel who would like to? Reverend Frank? Okay.
It's a comment for me that is helpful for consideration as part of the development of the document. We need to take some of the comments as contributions for the document. Indeed, we don't want to be a charter, charter class of people who talk and do nothing. We want change, and we must have a program of action to cause the change. And I think by the time we hit June, we should be able to have a clear program of action.
Okay, thank you for that, Reverend Frank, and thank you, Mr. Jim Powell. Are there any more? The lady at the back? Please
Hi,
also
everyone.
introduce yourself.
Ritu Metsemakuya from the Citizen newspaper. So my question is, SA has been lulled into letting government accept responsibility or given government responsibility for pretty much everything. So to defend or effect change in democracy is going to take a major mind shift. Practically, how long will this take?
I don't know who to give it to. Should I give it to Comrade Sean or should I give it to Reverend Frank? Okay.
And what we've done is to identify the problem. What we now have to go through is a process of getting the country to talk about democracy, and also what do they think needs to be done to improve it, to make it work better, to change it where it's necessary. And I think thereafter, lobbying for the kind of change or advocating for the change that emanates from a conference around which we would probably have consensus around a set of basic things depends on the kind of power that this campaign and all of those associated with it will be able to wield. So I don't think anybody can answer that question.
Maybe to just say that we welcome very much the hope it'll last a short time. We think that from the sense in which the grafters have been entrenched in different ways in our society, we're probably going to go for a long haul. And Sean is right, we can't estimate how long that will be.
Are there any more questions? Okay. Here's a question at the back. At the back. Thanks. Please introduce yourself, sir.
Thanks. It's Kugan Pillay, and I'm a member of a newly formed civil society group, or being formed, Leaders for Integrity. We heard from Busi Siwa the kind of leaders we're presently having and who are coming through, and hence the cause. The question I wanted to ask is, has a date been finalized for the conference, or could I propose Mandela Day as the day for the conference? Thanks.
Okay, I will answer that question. The date has not been confirmed. we have it scheduled for June, and communication around the date will be made in due course. We will communicate it through our various communications.